When critics boldly claim no evidence exists for Yasuke's samurai status, they're conveniently ignoring three separate primary sources from the 1580s, documents written by different observers who had no reason to coordinate their accounts. What makes these sources particularly compelling is their diversity. We have Japanese court chronicles, European missionary correspondence, and a Japanese warrior's personal diary, all independently confirming aspects of Yasuke's elevated status. The reliability of these primary sources has been thoroughly evaluated by historians. The Shinchoki is considered highly credible for its detailed accounts of Nobunaga's court activities. The Jesuit accounts, while potentially carrying some cultural biases of their European authors, are valued for their contemporaneous observations. The Ietada diary is particularly respected for its day-by-day documentation and attention to detail. The Shinchoki manuscript contains one of the most revealing passages about Yasuke's position. It explicitly states, "This black man was given a stipend, the name Yasuke, a sword with a decorative sheath and a private residence, etc. He is sometimes seen in the role of weapon bearer." This isn't ambiguous. It's a clear documentation of specific privileges that were hallmarks of samurai status. The stipend, ceremonial sword, and private residence weren't casual gifts. They represented formal recognition within Nobunaga's hierarchy. The second remarkable source comes from Jesuit correspondence. In October 1581, Lorenzo Mexia wrote that Nobunaga favored Yasuke so much that people speculated he would make him a tono, feudal lord. Think about what this means. The level of favor Yasuke received wasn't just notable, it generated talk about him potentially becoming a feudal lord. This reveals how significant his position had become in just a short time. Our third independent confirmation comes from the Ietada diary entry from May 11th, 1582. The diary records that Nobunaga was accompanied by a black man who had been given a stipend presented by Christians. His body was the color of black ink, and his height was 6 shaku and 2 byu. His name was Yasuke. Again, we see mention of the stipend, a financial arrangement typically associated with samurai status, and his close proximity to Nobunaga himself. Yasuke's 1579 arrival in Japan wasn't just any moment, it was a critical turning point. He stepped onto Japanese soil just 35 years after the first Europeans had reached the island nation. The country was experiencing a cultural transformation that would fundamentally reshape its relationship with the outside world. For most Japanese at this time, foreigners weren't just unusual, they were practically mythical. Now suddenly, in Nobunaga's court stood a man who embodied a three-continent cultural exchange. African by birth, arriving with European Jesuits, now serving in the inner circle of Japan's most powerful warlord. This wasn't lost on Nobunaga. Historical records show he wasn't merely collecting exotic curiosities. He was strategically pursuing foreign knowledge and technology that could enhance his power. The Jesuits noted Nobunaga's fascination with not just Yasuke's physical presence, but with what he represented. Access to knowledge, perspectives, and diplomatic connections from worlds beyond Japan's shores. Foreign influences were reshaping Japanese art, architecture, technology, and military strategy. Yasuke's presence in Nobunaga's court during this critical period meant he wasn't just witnessing this transformation, he was actively participating in it. Alessandro Valignano's carefully orchestrated mission to Japan challenges everything about this simplistic view. His 1574 letter from Mozambique reveals a sophisticated approach to personnel selection, showing he deliberately chose skilled individuals who could effectively represent the Jesuit mission to foreign rulers. This wasn't casual selection, it was a diplomatic strategy in action. What's particularly interesting is that Yasuke's language abilities were specifically noted in Jesuit correspondence. These records mention he could speak Japanese moderately, a skill that proved invaluable in facilitating his interactions with Nobunaga and others at court. Language proficiency requires opportunity, intelligence, and dedicated effort, all suggesting Yasuke held a position of significant responsibility within the mission. Critics often dismiss Yasuke's importance by pointing to his brief 16-month service period, arguing that such a short tenure or his lack of a surname couldn't possibly qualify him for samurai status. But this argument also fails to account for how social mobility functioned in pre-Edo Japan. Before the establishment of the rigid four-class system, warriors could be recognized based primarily on their relationship with a powerful lord. The mere fact that Yasuke received a name, stipend, and ceremonial recognition from Nobunaga would have established his position in the social hierarchy, regardless of whether he possessed a formal surname. Merit and a lord's recognition often mattered more than lineage or naming conventions. The meritocratic nature of this period allowed individuals to rise rapidly through the ranks based on demonstrated abilities and loyalty rather than time served. In fact, it could be argued that these times were defined by policies of its time, especially considering Hideyoshi's rise from a surnameless background. Toyotomi Hideyoshi serves as perhaps the most powerful counter-argument to this misconception. Here was a man who began life without a surname, born to peasant farmers, yet through his abilities and loyalty, ultimately rose to become the second great unifier of Japan. If we applied the must-have-a-surname rule consistently, we'd have to deny Hideyoshi's samurai status during his early career, an absurd proposition given his historical significance. What's even more telling is how Nobunaga himself approached the naming of his retainers. Historical records show he frequently granted names and titles based on demonstrated ability and loyalty rather than birth or heritage. This merit-based approach to recognition was characteristic of Nobunaga's leadership style, which valued effectiveness over tradition. Professor Hirayama emphasizes this point in his research, noting that receiving a name from a lord, even without a surname, is a significant honor and can indicate a recognized status. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the Ietada diary, which explicitly documents Yasuke's participation in the Battle of Tenmokuzan in 1582. The decisive conflict that led to the total defeat of the once powerful Takeda clan. The diary entry states that Yasuke was seen accompanying Nobunaga after this major victory, placing him directly in the heart of one of the most significant military campaigns of the period. Jesuit correspondence provides even more striking evidence of Yasuke's military contributions. When the infamous Honnoji incident occurred, the surprise attack that would ultimately lead to Nobunaga's death, these European observers recorded that Yasuke fought to defend Nobutada, Nobunaga's heir, in defense of the ruling family during one of Japanese history's most infamous betrayals. These primary sources reveal a man whose actions were significant enough to be meticulously recorded during times of war and political upheaval. Yasuke was an active participant in military campaigns, a trusted weapon-bearer for Japan's most powerful warlord, a fighter who defended the ruling family during the crisis, and a cultural intermediary with valuable linguistic skills. If you find this video helpful, please give it a like and share it with others. It really helps us create a more accurate online space. If you're interested in Japanese history, consider subscribing for more content like this. Be sure to check out our Yasuke playlist for more content